We are ready for Science Tuesday, March the 24th. So you've got your book out and you're ready. You've got all of your things there. Yesterday we talked about the carbon cycle, and I asked you to use some of your artistic abilities and try to draw that out and really think it through. I think as we take more time to stop in science and do some drawing and do some sketching, and it'll help us remember these processes better, because as you draw them you have to understand what's going on. You need to know what those arrows mean as you draw them around. And I also want you to label. Don't just draw the pieces and the arrows. I want you to do some labeling, and it'll help you to really understand that so much better than if you're just writing the steps down on a piece of paper. We're going to practice this a little bit more today as we see a couple of more natural cycles. One, you're going to be reading on page 198 about the nitrogen cycle. And it tells you at the beginning that, like carbon, okay, like the one we talked about yesterday, it is essential to life. Without it, not everything can function. It's another thing that God created in our atmosphere, and He created very specific ways that it is produced and cycled and used over and over again, and we need it. Okay, so we're learning about a few of the ways that it is made usable for us. On its own, okay, as a gas, it is not usable to us. It has to be mixed with other things, with other elements, in order for us to use it. One way the book tells you, and I want you to read this through so that you can understand it well. Well, one way that it changes into a usable form for us is through lightning. Lightning causes that nitrogen gas to combine with the oxygen in the rain that forces it down into the soil. Another thing is bacteria. Bacteria is really, really, really helpful with the use of nitrogen for us. Bacteria is found on, that's why you have this picture here, root nodules in certain plants. And a nodule is just, see those little bumps? That's all a nodule is just a little bump. And so it lives in there, and it is able to, it says the tiny bacteria absorb the nitrogen gas from the soil and combine it to form nitrogen compounds, and these help the plants to grow. But guess what happens to the plants? The plants get eaten, right? The plants get eaten by the animals, and the animals take those in. And then it's used that way. Animals get protein and nitrogen by eating the plants or other animals. And in this way, they get a form of nitrogen that they can use. So we see on the other page here, we see the cycle of how nitrogen is used. We have the bacteria on the nodules breaking that down. We have bacteria in the ground breaking down waste and the plant remains, and they're returning nitrogen back to the soil. The nitrogen is released in the air, and then it comes back. Animals get nitrogen by eating. This makes me think, if we look at this and we think about bean plants and peanuts, it makes me think of George Washington Carver. Remember, one of the things, this was a black man who taught black students, and he taught them so that they would know what to do with their land. This is after the Civil War, and he wanted them to be able to have a crop that wasn't destroying the land. The South had planted cotton for years and years and years and years, and it was destroying, the soil wasn't any good anymore. So George Washington Carver discovered that peanuts were giving the very needed nitrogen back to the soil that made it good for growing. So he tried to get everyone to grow peanuts. Well, what's the problem? They could sell cotton easily, but what are they going to do with peanuts? Who wants a peanut? Who wants to buy all these peanuts if you can't use it for anything? Or anything, big that's really going to give you nutrition or help. And so that's why he started setting up in his lab and just experimenting, and he came up with hundreds and hundreds of products just from the peanut. I believe he came up with like shampoos and oils and weird stuff, not just things that you eat. And he set out those peanuts, and he said, God, you made these. These are good for us. These are good for the soil. Show me what it is that we can do with them. And I think I've told you this, but he called his workshop God's little workshop, um, because he gave God credit for the ideas that he got. Okay, so here's another cycle that I want you to get your sketch pad out, get a sheet of paper. I have two here. We're going to talk about the other one on the next page. So what I did is I took one page and I split it down the middle instead of doing a whole big one on the nitrogen cycle and then one on the water. So I have one on this side. I've got my little rabbit. He's not the best looking little rabbit, but he's got his plants there that he's eating. His waste is going into the soil. The bacteria down here is breaking up that nitrogen, releasing it back into the air. And I added something that they didn't have in the book, because the book told us that lightning is one way that nitrogen gets back into the soil. I included that. And then it kind of looks like my rain is coming out from the bottom of this lightning bolt. But I included rain too, because the rain is what's pushing that back down into the soil. One really good, I made myself a note up here. Some good videos that you can look up to help you understand these cycles are study jams. So if you go to YouTube and put in study jam nitrogen cycle, study jam water cycle, which is the next one we're going to talk about, they have some excellent videos that you should be able to watch, and they help you understand the process. And if you're fuzzy on any of the parts, maybe it can make it clear for you. It's also just fun to watch videos when we have a chance. Okay, next page. Okay, so you're looking at the one with the buffalo at the top and then the water cycle at the bottom. We're talking about the water cycle. And this is something that you've talked about since you were in probably second and third grade. The idea that water is constantly being cycled. It comes down from on high, then it goes down low, and then it goes back up again. But as you get older and have more knowledge, we want to add some different words in there and make sure that you can describe the whole process instead of just saying it comes down and it goes back up again and it goes in a big cycle. You can be a little more complicated in your language and explanations. So we want to identify each step of that. So on the other side of my page here, I have the water cycle. And I added a little part to the picture that they don't have too. I added a sun, even though this is rainy, and I think that's why their picture is real dark and gloomy, and so they don't have a sun. But you have to have the sun, because the sun is important for the evaporation that's going to happen here. So I kind of added it. It kind of comes and goes. It's stronger on some days. But it's always there, and it's a needed part. So I added that in mine. You're going to have some big words that you're going to be looking at today. Evaporation. Let's see, I want to start with precipitation. Let's start there. A lot of times, now it's a cycle. You could start anywhere, right? You could pick one spot and it just goes and goes and goes and goes. But let's start with precipitation. That's one we're kind of familiar with. It comes down in rain or any other form, and see how I labeled that there? Okay, precipitation. So it comes down, then it's either soaked up into the ground or it goes into the oceans. When it's soaked up into the ground, we call that groundwater. Water that is being returned back to the soil. Sometimes it creates little puddles or pockets where it doesn't get completely absorbed. It gets soaked up by the roots. That's why I have the trees and the roots there. And the trees use the water. Remember, they need water and they need sun for photosynthesis. And then the trees do something called transpiration. And transpiration just is simply when the water vapor moves out of the plant. Okay, so the tree or plant is releasing that water vapor back into the air, and that process is called transpiration. So I drew little lines that kind of look like steam, like water coming out of the leaves. And it goes back into the air. And then you have evaporation. Evaporation is when the sun hits the water warms up, and then the liquid water turns back into gas, and it rises up. And then when it gets so high and it's colder up here, we have condensation happening. It condenses because it gets colder, and then it turns back into droplets. Okay, so it turns into gas, comes up here, turns back into droplets. When the cloud, and you see my little droplets in there, when the cloud is so full of droplets and it's heavy and it can't hold it anymore, then we have precipitation again. So you have all of these parts that are an important part of the whole water cycle. One word I wanted to introduce to you, I wrote this in a note at the top, was the word hydrology. Anytime you have a word with an ology on the end, like biology, you're talking about the study of. Bio means life, so ology means the study of life. Theology, okay, theo is God, or theos is God, so ology is a study, so the study of God is what theology means. Hydrology, hydro is the word for water. So you've got the study of water. So hydrology is the study of water. So another name for the water cycle, here's a big 5th grade word for you, probably higher. Hydrological cycle. There you go. Impress somebody today. Hydrological cycle. So I want you to draw your pictures of the nitrogen cycle and the hydrological cycle. And add things if you think that something has been left out, or you can add it in a different way that makes it clearer for you. As long as you understand all these parts, that's what this is helping you do. This is helping you sit down, think it through. Also, drawing and coloring can be a little calming. As we might be nervous or a little anxious, this allows us to just sit down, calm our mind, allow us to color a little bit, allow us to draw. It's absolutely okay. And it's perfect for your thinking and your ability. Take a moment every once in a while, and the art hubs. Go to YouTube, pull up an art hub, draw something that you can add to your cycle. Maybe draw a really good tree, or draw a really good rabbit, or or just pick something else. I challenge you to just experiment with lots of different things during this time. Okay, so today I want you to read those pages. So that means you're going to read about the nitrogen cycle, which starts on 198, and you're going to read through the water cycle, which ends on 201. And your study guide is mainly having you walk through this cycle. And the same thing on the back, the questions that it asks are about the cycle, the water cycle. So my challenge to you is, I don't think you necessarily need this today. If you do this. If you do this, this is not necessary. Excuse me. I will allow you to choose. If today is just not a drawing day for you, and you would rather fill out the questions and think it through in that way, but I want you to choose not based on what's easiest for you or what's quickest so that you can finish. I want you to think about how you learn. And I want you to say, okay, I really learn if I write things out. If I read this well and I think it through, I will remember it. Great, do that. If you're the type of person that just fills in the blank, and then as soon as you leave it, it's instantly gone, do this. Remember, I told you I watched that video about how drawing helps with our memory. You can pull this up in your memory so much easier than you can the blanks on this page. This will be like stamped in your forehead. So don't think about, okay, what's fastest for me so that I can get done with this and check it off the list. We're not getting her done, right? We're learning. So what's going to be best for your learning? The drawing, and this is there's no right answer here. For you personally, does this work or does this work? You decide.